Erie, happy Cinco de Mayo. Welcome into Flagship City Sports Talk, brought to you by Quick Fill. Paul Adamczak here filling in for Nick Artman today, but I'm not alone. Chiming in via satellite this morning, I'm very pleased to have our sports insider, Isaac Petcash, with us. IP, how was your weekend, brother?
Oh, it was wonderful, man. First weekend in a long time that I didn't have anything going on, which is kind of hard to believe this time of year. Felt really, really good. I wish it didn't rain because now I cut my grass on Thursday. It needs cut again. It's wild this time of year. You cut your grass, you watch it grow. 48 hours later, it doesn't even look like you cut it. So maybe I'm just in dad mode, but I need my grass cut again.
Dude, that's super dad mode, and it's hilarious that you said that. I got home early this morning, walked out back to look at my yard, and I was like, it's soaked. And it's like a foot tall. And I'm like, when am I going to be able to mow this? It's going to be like, I'm just going to buy a goat or something.
You know what? Honestly, that might be cheaper, though, if you think about it.
It might. With fuel price in this economy?
Yeah, in this economy, man, you buy 2 or 3 of those, you're all set.
Absolutely. In addition to IP, as always, we're joined by our award-winning producer, the great and powerful Rich Smith. How are you this morning, my friend?
Not too bad. My yard always looks like Wild Kingdom.
How was your weekend camping? A little bit wet,
it was soggy.
I imagine.
It was
soggy.
Yeah. But, we got out there. We had a bunch of fun. And, we're back to civilization on a Monday, which is why I'm not on camera, because you don't need to see this first thing on a Monday.
It's like Grizzly Adams on a Monday.
That's it. Exactly.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, I appreciate you being here. Let's get into the show. Don't forget, folks, you can listen anytime, anywhere on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to give us a follow or shout out on Twitter at FC Sports Talk. I'm at RufusP88. Isaac's handle is at IJP Broadcasting. Folks, it's Cinco de Mayo, and we're serving up a full platter of sports takes, spicier than your uncle's homemade salsa. Today, we're recapping another big week in D10 sports. We'll get into Gannon golf team's recent success. Plus, later in the show, we'll talk Cleveland Cavaliers and play everybody's favorite game, Overreaction Monday. Let's get into the North Shore Rewind. Rich, let's get this fiesta started. All right, welcome into the North Shore. Isaac, before we got going, I just wanted to mention right at the top of the episode, the D10 Boys Tennis Singles Championships are today, 3 p.m. at Westwood Racket Club in AA. We are guaranteed 2 new singles champions this year. In AA, number 1, Gavin Ferretti, a junior from Cathedral Prep, will take on his teammate, freshman Charbel Mubarak, the number 2 seed. And up in AAA, the number 1 seed, David Makatowicz, the fantastic freshman from McDowell, taking on number 2, Arian Nodaswala, the senior from Erie High, a Cathedral Prep transfer, playing up to the number 2 seed in AAA. 3 p.m. today at Westwood Racket Club. Make it there if you can. Going to be
look, Paul. Now
yes.
Nick is not on the show today, so it's you and I. We do not have to gloss over tennis today.
No, I'm good with that. I just, I wanted to mention it at the top because there is, as always, so much to talk about, especially in this A block. So let's get into it.
I agree. And I agree. And I think, it's funny because, you look at obviously some of the high school sports and tennis, being slightly overlooked. These are great players. So if you have a chance, make sure to get out and check it out.
I agree. With no further ado, it's fast moving A block. Let's get into our District 10 Players of the Week. I'm going to start this one off. Yeah. And I hate to this is not a repeat episode. This is all new. I'm going to go with Blake Cook again, Isaac, because the Corey Jr. erased not 1, but 2 26-year-old records this past weekend at the Oil Country Invite, winning the 110 hurdles in a time of 14:17, 300-meter hurdles in a time of 38:03. He broke the records of, if you're a hurdling guy, West Middlesex great Ben Steingrabe from 1999. Blake Cook, only a junior, and he's winning by 15 meters in the 110. He's winning by a whole 2 hurdles in the 300. He's an absolute talent.
Paul, are we at a point now where we're looking into history for the potentially most number of District 10 records broken in one season?
He is legitimately the best hurdler I've seen at the high school level in person.
Wow.
I raced against, so he erased all the Corey records. When I was a senior, Zach Dow had all the Corey records, and he won states. He was a state champion, and Blake Cook has absolutely erased him from the record books. That's how good this dude is.
That bodes well for the end of the season then, right?
Yes, I agree. Who do you got? District 10 Player of the Week.
I'm actually going to go with teams, actually, because I think a lot of players from these teams specifically were great. I'm going to start with Harbor Creek softball and the way that they were able to beat McDowell and erase what was an earlier season loss. They won a 4-3 game, were up 4-0 in the 7th inning, gave up 3 runs, and kept the lead. We had Tim Caputa, their head coach, on our Gem City Sports podcast last Thursday. This is a team last year that won the state championship. They lost 5 of their 9 starters, and yet they still continue to dominate. They lead their region. They've got a huge couple of games coming up this week. I really like Harbor Creek for softball. Then for baseball, I'm going to go with Mercyhurst Prep. All Randy Durkowski's team did last week was win games by a combined score of 30-0. This offense is something else to behold. They got a lot of starters back from last year, including some of their top pitchers. 13-1, Paul. They're now 5-0 sitting in Region 4. And, with Union City just behind them, it looks like if it doesn't get careful, Mercyhurst Prep might run away with this region.
Unbelievable. Mercyhurst Prep, I think you said it. It's a team that doesn't rebuild, they just reload. Year after year, always a tough team to play against. Why is that? Is it coaching? Is it just
Randy? I think Randy does a great job, but I think part of it, honestly, is the fact that he does a really, really good job of getting young players into varsity games and big leverage moments early in their career. I mean, you take a look at a guy like Hunter Cray from last year, who became their number 1 pitcher, struggled early on in the season, and then became lights out, especially through part of the district tournament, right? That's just the first guy off the top of my head. But all the time, Randy's so good about not necessarily being beholden to his seniors. If he has younger players that are capable of playing and capable of being in big leverage moments, he knows that if he plays them early, they'll be good to do it later in their careers. And I think that's part of the reason why you see this team so good every year.
Gotta love that. Baseball only players? Are these like year-round, like AAU basketball players? They're baseball players and that's it?
I think it's baseball and it's softball both. I mean, you're seeing a lot of baseball, softball players in this area now, Paul, do a really, really good job of being able to find year-round teams, and we see it with both leagues here. So a lot of these guys and girls who are starting their seasons have been playing consistently, and I think that's part of the reason why you see now so many teams that are just head and shoulders above the competition, because a lot of those players come from AAU or travel teams or fall ball teams.
Yeah, that's specialization, man. It's taken over and it's getting younger and younger. All right, I've got one more I wanted to get into before we do our 2-minute drill. I have to mention, I wanted to say Ava Regal. She had a great day, won the 100 and 200. How about Megan Pulio from Meadville? The junior, listen to this. She took gold in the 1600 with a time of 5:09. She took gold in the 800 with a time of 2:17. She took gold in the 400 with a time of 58.8. And then a bronze in the 4x400 melee, in which she anchored. This is why I had to put her head and shoulders above Ava Regal. Her 1600 and 800 meter races weren't even close. Second place was 11 seconds slower in the mile, nearly 9 seconds slower in the 800. 4.5 seconds per lap. She's winning, well, you can't say by a mile, but just about.
In racing terms, it's by a mile, because I mean, anything over 2 seconds, Paul, is essentially domination.
Yes.
Is that kind of what anything over that where, if you slow down but still could win the race, 9 seconds is ridiculous.
She could finish running backwards if she wanted to.
Well, with the way that these runners run, I mean, that's almost an entirety of a home stretch that you have a lead in.
Yes.
And you're in toying territory with people at that point.
You really are. And again, another junior has another year to compete. Just unbelievable. All right, we're at the end of the A block. We're going to do our 2-minute drill, the fastest 2 minutes in radio. Ready? Here we go.
Let's go.
3 District 10 standouts earned spots on the Pennsylvania boys basketball all-state teams. Erie First's Avery Collins headlining the group, led District 10 with 27.6 points per game, earned a Class 1A first-team nod, with Meadville's tandem of Jack Burchard and Lucas Lutheran landing on the Class 5A third team. The Erie Seawolves wrapped up a 6-game series against the Binghamton Rumble Ponies with a 3-3 split. Erie secured victories in the series opener of the first. I'm terrible at this today. In the first game of Sunday's doubleheader, in the opener, they dominated a 13-3 win, powered by 6 home runs, 2 of them from Jake Holton, who went 4 for 4 with 5 ribbies. However, Binghamton took the second game 6-4, resulting in an even split for the series. Erie now holds a 17-10 record on the season. Mercyhurst Tennis capped its first Division I season with big honors. Kayla Dean earned first-team All-NEC in singles and teamed with Roshan Murphy for second-team doubles honors after claiming the NEC doubles title back in the fall. Daria Rogova went 10-2 in singles to land second-team recognition as well. On the men's side, Danella Raccoon grabbed second-team honors with an 8-7 singles record and a strong finish in conference play. Penn State Bear in track and field wrapped up a strong showing at the SUNYAC Outdoor Championships over the weekend. On the women's side, Ivy LaFawn took bronze in the 400 hurdles. Braylee Lukehart placed third in the javelin, and the Lady Lions finished fourth as a team. For the men, senior Dan Dabrowski shattered a 46-year-old meet record in the discus with a throw of 174 feet 11 inches, now third nationally in Division III. Carter Tobin won the 100 meters in a time of 10.92 and also picked up a silver medal in the 200 meter. The men's squad finished third overall. And we'll finish out. Edinboro men's tennis captured its fifth straight PSAC title, sweeping Bloomsburg 4-0 after weather delays stretched the match over 2 days and 2 locations. Edinboro now heads to the NCAA Atlantic Regional. Fast-moving first block. That was the North Shore Rewind. We'll dig into some Gannon golf up next. You're listening to Flagship City Sports Talk, brought to you by Quick Fill. City Sports Talk. Paul Adamczak, Rich Smith, Isaac Petcash joining you this morning. Thank you for being with us. Lots of sports going on this upcoming week. Starting today, the Gannon University women's golf team is headed back to the NCAA postseason for a fifth straight year after capturing their sixth consecutive PSAC championship last weekend in Kutztown. The Golden Knights locked up an automatic bid, and they are the number 8 seed in this year's NCAA Division II East Regional. That runs May 5th through the 7th, starting today at the Meadows Golf Club up in Allendale, Michigan, hosted by the number 2 seed Grand Valley State. The top 5 teams advance to the NCAA championships, which will be out in Las Vegas later this month. Isaac, senior Diddy Peterson from Denmark, headlines this strong group from Gannon, 3-time PSAC Player of the Year, 6 top 5 finishes this season, and she just tied Gannon's all-time wins record. Wish we could get her on the show, but obviously she's playing this morning.
Yeah, I've talked to her probably what feels like for her 7 or 8 times in the last couple of weeks with my job at Gannon. And actually, you know, Paul, you talk about all the records and the accolades. The one that is the most impressive was her 3rd consecutive individual PSAC championship, which she just wrapped up last week. She's the first women's golfer ever to do that.
Wow.
You know, what's so fascinating for the regional this year for Gannon women's golf is they've always been dominant in the PSAC, of course, for the last half dozen years. We've recognized that. But, talking with head coach Scott Stano, the one thing that he really said last year about this team is that they felt like they could make a jump to the national championships. And they fell just shy in that mark last year. Top 5 teams this season make it in. They've got an outside chance, I think better than an outside chance based on their ranking and seeding. But I think if you take from what you saw last year with this team, it's that the first round really almost put them out of contention to begin with. Mm-hmm. So that's what makes today look really intriguing is I think when you look at the last 2 days of the tournament from last year, Gannon actually played incredibly well. I think, based on what we saw, they were good enough in those last couple of rounds to be able to make the national championship. But the one thing that Scott's talked about to me in our interviews last week is that you can't win the regional. You can't play your way into the national championship on day one, but you can play your way out of it. So I think this year is going to be really intriguing. The girls tee off in about 40 minutes time as their first tee time to see how they do in round number 1. I think this is something that you're really going to be intrigued, at least for I am, and many Gannon fans will be, to look at. You mentioned Didi Peterson. Her and a couple of others have, of course, experience at this level in terms of the regional competition. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see just to see how they perform in the first round, given the fact that really it was the one round that detrimented their chances at a national championship run and at least placement in that from last season.
Well, you talked to Coach Stano. What did he say the outlook was for them this week? And how does he feel his lineup stacks up against the competition they'll see?
Yeah, well, it works out fairly well. Andrea Martinez and Didi Peterson both have experience at this specific course in the regional 2 years ago. So they both at least know how this course shapes up. They talked about that it is a difficult course because of the length. You have to be able to have good drives in the fairway, as is with any course. But if you get into the woods, you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have the shorter course where you can get lucky and maybe put it on the green, even if you have a short iron in the rough or something like that. So I think when you look at how they stack up against the competition, the key is going to be consistency. I don't think birdies are necessarily going to happen on a consistent basis to get into the NCAAs. But what you can't do is you can't have bad days off the tee. And we're going to talk about it's going to be the same thing with the men when they get into the regional at Whispering Woods. If you can put drives in the fairway, even if it ends up becoming a par, you have a better chance, in my view, than not to end up making the national tournament just because of the way that course is designed and set up. Obviously, I haven't been there, but in talking with Coach Stano, he said, a couple of years back when they played in the regional, that was something that they really knew had to happen, and it didn't necessarily happen early on. So I think Martinez and Peterson will both really help to lead this team, a very talented, but in some aspects young team, to hopefully get some drives into the fairway and play aggressively towards the end of the tournament.
I mean, we've mentioned Peterson. You talked about her at length. Obviously, senior, maybe the best golfer to come out of Gannon. But the youth on that team is impressive as well. Freshman Alexandria Lecourreau averaged 79 this season. Sophomore Chloe Mateo 79.1. Add depth. They tied for third at the PSAC. So this isn't a team that's going to see a cliff after the graduation of Peterson. Am I right?
No, you're 100% right. And one of the things that Scott talked to me about, even when we did the interview with Didi, is he said, no offense to Didi, but I hope someone eventually breaks her record of 3 straight individuals. Obviously, they'd have to get all 4 in a row.
Right.
But I do think, to your point, we were talking about depth of high school teams like Mercyhurst Prep. Gannon men's and women's golf has been able to do the same thing under Coach Stano, and of course, before then under head coach Coleman, is that they are just able to find players that can work themselves into the top 5 and be able to be consistent players. And so really, when you think about it, in getting to nationals, that is where you have to be consistent. Your top 1 or 2 players, even your third player, is going to be good enough to be able to get you to compete. How do the 4 and 5s do? And so that is something that's going to be really interesting for me with Emily Donahue and Chloe Mateo sitting there in those spots, depending on how things shake out for the next couple of days. How can they perform as well? And I think we really saw consistency at PSACs, as you mentioned. And as a team, this Gannon squad started out a bit slow, and then they just kind of poured it on from there as their experience helped. So I really think that this team has a great chance to make national championships this year. I think if they play even slightly more consistently at this course than they did 2 years ago in the first round, I think they got a really good shot, and it'd be really neat to get to see them head to Vegas for the championship round.
Would love to see it, and they're getting hot at the right time. They've won their last 2 tournaments heading into the regionals, so best of luck to the Gannon women's. Isaac, let's move over then to the Gannon men's, and this one a little bit closer to home. We're going to see the 2025 NCAA Division II Men's Golf Atlantic East Regional later this week. That's going to be at Whispering Woods here in Erie. Tell me about this men's team, also coached by Stano. Who are a couple of names we need to be paying attention to for Gannon?
Yeah, Scott's got a busy week, right? I mean, he goes
right.
to Michigan, then he's going to do a quick turnaround and head back to Whispering Woods. But lucky enough, he knows the course well. He's, of course, related to the course owner, Rich Rocky. So this is where the men's and women's play their home events. I'll tell you what, if it's anything like what we saw in the regional preview a couple of weeks back at Whispering Woods, we're in for a lot of fireworks. Gannon won that as a team in a playoff. Giovanni Di Lorenzi, who's going to be one of the guys that you'll have to really look for, who will likely be in one of the top 2 spots for Gannon lineup. He'll be somebody that is really big to look out for. He made the birdie putt to secure Gannon's win in the playoff on the 18th hole a couple weeks back. The 2 Italians, Giovanni Di Lorenzi and Mattia Perini, who Mattia was named team MVP at our end of the year awards banquet. He won the individual PSAC championship back in the fall. And of course, those 2 were part of a team that ended up winning the entire thing for the first time ever. They were PSAC team championships. So those 2 at the top of the lineup will be something really interesting to look out for. I think when you look at the rest of the lineup, there are plenty of other guys that have a chance to really make a big break. I would also say as a potential sub, Jacob Wolak, who had himself a really nice preview round a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. He could be somebody, if need be, to insert himself into the lineup. He could be somebody that could be helpful as well. These guys are the defending regional champs, and they have to do it and defend their title on their home course. It's not going to be easy, but I'm excited to see what happens.
Isaac, Gannon men's and women's golf programs both heading into their NCAA regional championships this week. How significant is that for the school to have both teams competing at this level? And what does it say about the state of the golf programs under head coach Scott Stano?
It's huge. They just keep rolling. And I think specifically for the men, the fact that you get to host the regional at your home backyard, we want people to be able to come out and see this and get to experience some great golf. The weather's going to be beautiful. And I think it just shows the further growth and maturation of what these programs have been able to deliver. Coach Stano gets it. He understands what it takes to be successful. And he also understands what it takes to be able to market the golf community to Erie at large. I think, bringing the regional to Whispering Woods is a testament, I think, to just not only how good this team has been, but also how much this program has an impact on the Erie community. So, I think it's important for people to get out and get a chance to check this thing out, but also too, these 2 golf teams aren't going anywhere. They're going to be around for years and decades to come with a lot of success. And it's great to see both these teams on such a roll as well going into the regional. It also would be sweet to get to see both of them make the championships of NCAAs with the men in Florida this year.
We'd love to see them both. So to recap, Gannon women's team playing today, tomorrow, and Wednesday up in Michigan. Then Scott Stano has a quick turnaround. He's back Wednesday night. He wakes up Thursday morning. He's got to be at Whispering Woods Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the East Regional for the men's team. A busy week in golf. Hopefully the weather cooperates on both fronts. Best of luck to both.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Absolutely. That's the only thing that we can't plan for, right?
Well, it's funny because it actually rained during the regional preview at Whispering Woods a couple weeks back, and they were able to barge their way through it. Rich Rocky does a great job at that course, keeping it maintained. So we're hoping the 60s and sun, as is projected to be, continues that way. But man, you never know this. You never know this area, but they'll be ready to go. No doubt.
Love to see it, man. Appreciate you helping me out with the Gannon golf on this one. What a great in-depth look at both those teams. And like you said, I hope they both make it. Top 5 make it to the NCAAs. Women out in Las Vegas, men down in Florida. I think we should just travel with the team either way. You go to one, I'll go to the other. You pick, I'll go to the other side, and we'll cover these teams nice and close.
All right, I'm down. We're gonna do the hat draw like we did during the draft. We're gonna have Vegas and Florida in little hat things, and we'll decide that way to make it fair.
I love it, man. Before we get into the C block, I want to thank our sponsors, Quick Fill, Dauber Auto Supply, John's Wildwood Pizza. When we come back, what does Cleveland have to fix before tomorrow night? And was last night a one-game anomaly or a real problem for the Cavs moving forward? we'll get our Game 2 predictions on record. Stick around. You're listening to Flagship City Sports Talk, brought to you by Quick Fill. Welcome back. Flagship City Sports Talk here on a Monday, Cinco de Mayo. Well, folks, a surprise in Cleveland last night. The Indiana Pacers walk into Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse and punch the Cavs in the mouth, stealing game one of the Eastern Conference semifinal series. Tyrese Halliburton set the tone, and the Cavs suddenly find themselves playing from behind. Isaac, let's break it down. 121-112, the final. I mentioned him at the top. Tyrese Halliburton, 22 points, 13 assists, 6 rebounds, had a steal, 3 blocks. He was the first player in Pacers history with those numbers in a playoff game. All 5 of Indiana's starters got into double figures. And outside of, I'll say, a tremendous third quarter from Donovan Mitchell, not a whole lot from the Cleveland Cavaliers. What happened?
Well, I'll tell you what happened is exactly what happened from game one against the Miami Heat. Only this time the Cavs are playing better competition. I mean, we came on the air when they played Miami. I believe it was in game number 1 a couple of Mondays ago. And I said, and I remember saying specifically that if they continue to play this way at beginning of games, against better teams, I specifically mentioned Boston, but Indiana falls into that category, they're going to be in trouble. And what I saw last night and just my general observation of the game, and I think a lot of others would agree with me, is as good as this offense is and as good as, Evan Mobley has been in the 5 games in the playoffs, and I don't think Indiana has an answer for him, this defense has a lot of holes that I don't necessarily think people realized in the beginning part of the season. Indiana moved the ball around with ease. And some of the things that we saw Cleveland do so well against other teams, right? Move the ball around the perimeter, go high to low, low to high. Indiana was able to just fire off these quick one-touch passes, and Cleveland could not get their hands on the basketball. And the concerning part for me is that as Darius Garland isn't even that elite of a defender. They're missing a great shooting touch, but they're not necessarily missing a guy like DeAndre Hunter, right? Or Jared Allen, or somebody who can affect the play on defense. They're at full strength on that side of the ball. So I was really concerned last night, Paul, because everything that Cleveland thought that they were able to do in the first round against Miami in putting ball pressure on defense, they did not do last night. And that is something to me that's really concerning. Obviously, I still think they're the better team, but the reason I put the lower third of the Cavs done is because if you can't stop Indiana moving the ball, you're not going to win. Because that's what they do best is move the ball as Indiana.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of the top line, headline, superstar talent, but you said they win the right way. I think a couple of contributing factors to last night played into that 9-point win for the Pacers. Let's take a look at the 3-point shooting. Pacers went 19 of 36 from beyond the arc, 53%. And a lot of those were those quick pass, ball up, and just drained it. They made every big shot that they needed to. The Cavs played them close, especially in that second half. It was 1-point lead, back and forth, and the Pacers just never seemed to go away. The Cavs seemed to get on a run. They went on 15-4, 15-6 runs a couple of times in that second half, but the Pacers, as soon as they would get down, somebody would be open for a wide open 3, and they'd knock it down every time. On the other side, let's talk about the Cavs 3-point shooting, or really the lack thereof. 9 of 38 last night, 23.7% from beyond the arc. That's a playoff low. That's a season low. And I've said this on the show a number of times. Like, you live by the 3, you die by the 3. And I think last night was one of those instances where the Cavs, if they're not falling, you're going to lose that game.
The other thing that's the scariest thing, too, when you look at the stats, Paul, and I think there are plenty of things that you can do to break it down, is Indiana put up 121 points and they only grabbed 7 offensive rebounds the whole game. It's not even like Cleveland was giving up second chance opportunities. Indiana was just shooting the lights out of the gym, which, you could play devil's advocate and say, well, they're not going to shoot that well for the rest of the series and Cleveland will just dominate. But my point is that if you're the Cavs, and again, I have not watched every game. My wife has. She actually could probably answer this better than me.
All right,
just from my observation, just from my observation, I have her call in, right? But just from my observation, the way I see it is if you're Cleveland, you have to put the pressure on defense now up high around the 3-point line. You cannot allow Indiana to have open looks from 3 because they're okay with that. I mean, you look at the way the Pacers played in this game. Heck, even big guys like Pascal Siakam shot 5 threes last night. So they do a really good job of rotating from the free throw line up high. And I just don't think Cleveland was ready for it last night. We saw them make the run at the end of the third quarter. They grabbed the lead. They were down a couple heading into the fourth, maybe 1 or 2, I believe. And then it just seemed like even when they were making shots, they couldn't come up with a stop on defense. So I think if you're Kenny Atkinson, this is really when you got to make your bread. I think you got to really come up with a great defensive strategy to stop these guys. You know, I think the offense will figure itself out. 112 still not a bad score. I think they can get up to 120, 125 a game. But if you're letting Indiana shoot wide open looks as much as you did last night, I don't know if they're going to win a single game this series. Your defense has to make a drastic change and fast.
I expect both sides, from 3-point shooting percentage to, over the course of time, regress to the mean. Cavs' worst 3-point shooting night all season. I expect that to regress to where they're normally at. Same thing with the Pacers. One of their best 3-point shooting performances of the season. I expect that to regress to where they normally are. My question for you is, how concerning is it for Cleveland that even with Donovan Mitchell's 33, no one else really rose to the moment offensively last night? Now, you mentioned Evan Mobley, who's had a terrific season. DeAndre Hunter was maybe the 6th man of the year. Nobody really else got it going on the offensive end.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Jerome, you could really make the argument was your best output on offense besides Donovan Mitchell. I mean, Evan Mobley, I think, was aggressive on the boards and he was hard to stop. He just didn't get all the shots up in the world. He only shot the ball 13 times, which I think if you're Cleveland with the mismatch, you would have liked to see that more. I do think it will be interesting, Paul. And again, I don't know what Darius Garland's status is going to be. I know they've kind of been a little mum and hush. Who knows when he's going to come back in this series? But, you know, Sam Merrill was in the starting lineup last night. Right. I'm not sure if I'm Kenny Atkinson, I'd consider putting in DeAndre Hunter there in the starting lineup just because of the way that he can play both sides of the basketball. And I think he gives you another option inside to that middle range area where you can play more aggressive, maybe grab a couple more offensive rebounds, not allow Indiana to shoot the basketball. I mean, Indiana last night only put up 83 shots. And they still were, dynamic from the floor. They were over 50%. Cleveland had 13 more shots in the game. So I would think about changing your starting lineup. But you're right. I mean, the bench has to get even that much more involved. I think, you know that you're going to get a lot every single game from Ty Jerome. But Isaac Okoro has become virtually irrelevant. Dean Wade has not performed very well. He only took 2 shots last night. So I think if you're going to have those two guys, Hunter and Ty Jerome, come off the bench, maybe one of them then needs to start, because I think as long as Darius Garland is out, I'm not so sure that Sam Merrill is the guy that you necessarily want there in the starting lineup.
No, I agree with you. Sam Merrill, who started the last couple of games, maybe his worst outing in a while, never really known as a defensive guy anyway. He's kind of your 3-point ace, and that really wasn't even going for him last night. So really a tough night for him overall on both ends of the floor. I agree. I expect to see a change in the starting lineup. Darius Garland dealing with the big toe. One of the best things I saw last night during the game was somebody posted a meme, from the Big Lebowski, John Goodman's character. You need a toe. I can get you a toe. I can get you a toe by 3 p.m. So I don't know how long he stays out with that big toe injury. They mentioned the speed that Darius Garland. He's a different element when he's on the court. I think a lot of people are pleasantly surprised at how well he and Donovan Mitchell, 2 ball-dominant guards, have been able to play off of each other, well with each other throughout the course of the season. I think that's another element that the Cleveland Cavaliers were missing last night that could tilt things in their favor here going forward. My question moving forward, who do you need to see step up for Cleveland in Game 2 besides Donovan Mitchell?
I would say whoever's guarding Andrew Nembhard, the point guard for the Pacers, who led the team last night in scoring, and it just seemed like with Darius Garland out, that was the biggest mismatch of the entire night, Paul, was whoever Nembhard was guarding against it and being able to run the floor offensively. He just dominated, and he had whatever he wanted. And it wasn't even necessarily his shooting touch. It was he had first or second option to pass wherever he wanted to go. So I think you really need to make sure that if Darius isn't able to go for Game 2, you have to have a plan to attack him at the point guard. So I'm not going to single out any individual person, whether it's still Sam Merrill in the starting lineup, whether Max Strus is the guy. Do you throw Donovan on Andrew Nembhard for a little bit? We saw Donovan guard Halliburton a little bit there in the fourth quarter a couple of times. somebody that you can trust defensively to really be able to slow down the point guard for Indiana and the guy who can really, really run the floor very well for the Pacers. Because I think with Darius out, that was the one glaring issue, that allowed that ball movement to happen last night. And so I think whoever's guarding Andrew Nembhard really has to step up, because if not, you're in a situation where Indiana's going to do the same thing they did last night.
I agree. All right, under a minute before we close this out, let's put it on paper. Game 2 tomorrow night back in Cleveland. Cavs haven't lost back-to-back home games all season. Isaac, does Cleveland bounce back and even this thing up, or are we looking at a team in real trouble?
Yeah, I think they're going to win the game. I don't think you see Cleveland lose 2 at home, even if without Darius Garland, but I would be really concerned about games 3 and 4. If Cleveland loses tomorrow, the series is over. I don't think they're going to come back from a 2-0 series deficit the way Indiana's been playing, but I do think they'll bounce back and win tomorrow night.
Appreciate it. I got the Cavs tomorrow night as well. All right, when we get back, we'll play everyone's favorite game, Overreaction Monday. You're listening to Flagship City Sports Talk, brought to you by Quick. Isaac Pedcash, Rich Smith coming to you on a beautiful Monday morning in downtown Erie. Filling in for Nick Artman today. He's doing school stuff, or so he says. So we're going to have to play everyone's favorite game without him. Overreaction Monday. Isaac comes in with a list of overreactions, or really we'll say takes, and then it's up to us to decide whether that take is an overreaction or not an overreaction. I have a couple here, probably not as good as Isaac's, so if he runs out of ideas, I've got a couple of fill-ins, but Isaac, I will leave it up to you. This is your game. We stole this from you, so take it away, man. What do you have for us this Monday morning?
All right, so I'm going to start in the NFL because Nick and I on our show on Thursday talked a little bit about whether the Steelers quarterback situation or the Browns quarterback situation was worse. And we were split. I actually thought that Pittsburgh's was worse. Nick thought that Cleveland's was worse. And so it was a spirited debate. But I'm going to go to Pittsburgh for this to start out with the NFL, because I actually think the solution to the Steelers quarterback situation has been sitting there in front of them all along, and yet they have done nothing about it. I think Pittsburgh's best option at this point is to trade for Kirk Cousins and let him be the one to mentor Will Howard or Mason Rudolph this season.
All right. Well, I said I had a couple of overreaction statements written up. You just stole one of them. So
great minds think alike.
Exactly. I think that is a great idea. I don't think that's an overreaction at all. I think it has to be a post June 1st trade because of the $10 million signing bonus that was paid back on March the whatever because of the contracts and this and that.
Right.
Basically, I don't want Aaron Rodgers as a Pittsburgh Steeler. I'm not a Steelers fan, but I like Mike Tomlin as a coach, as a human being. I believe in his ability to lead a squad to where they need to be. They've been underpowered on offense the last couple of seasons. I don't think that's his fault. I think that's poor GMing, we'll say. But no, I don't think that's an overreaction at all. I don't think Will Howard is the guy going forward, certainly not this year, and I don't think beyond, but I do want somebody in the building who can obviously play in 2025, but be a mentor to the next Pittsburgh quarterback. And I would much rather that be Kirk Cousins than Aaron Rodgers at all. So I don't think that's an overreaction at all.
Well, and the thing too that you have to consider is even though Kirk Cousins still has a decent sized contract, it's not like you're going to be on the books for $50-60 million.
Right.
So I'm with you. I'm glad that we think alike in this. I think Kirk's the best option, and he's somebody that we haven't had in Pittsburgh very, very often. Besides, maybe a couple others. Level-headed. He brings a calm demeanor.
Yes.
He's somebody who doesn't necessarily create chaos in the locker room.
Yes.
So I would be all in for Kirk Cousins. I think that's a no-brainer. And I think that is to me at least the option that you have to go with given the circumstances for the Steeler team. All right, I got another one. Then I'm going to give a couple of you, Paul, because I'm curious. I like being the one to answer questions too. This one my daughter actually came up with. We're hanging out right now here.
I love it.
All right, last night on the Cleveland Cavaliers, I said last week on Overreaction Monday that anything less than 8 straight playoff wins for the Cavs would be considered a disappointment. Well, they're not going to get 8 straight playoff wins. Maybe they're going to be lucky to have 5
it
or
starts
6
tomorrow.
Total playoff wins. So I'm going to go the opposite way. If Cleveland doesn't win tomorrow night, they're going to be swept out of the second round, and serious considerations to trading one of the core 4 between Mitchell, Allen, Mobley, and Garland should occur in the offseason.
Okay, so I'm taking this as you have to take this in parts. You have to assume that they lose tomorrow night. Do they get swept in Indiana? Boy, I don't know. So something I remember when we talked to Sean Pebbles, who came in a couple of weeks ago ahead of the first playoff series. The Indiana Pacers were the last team that they played of the regular season. The Cavs went 1-3 against the Pacers this season. They finished second in the Eastern, not the conference, but their division. So the Pacers seem to have the Cavs number. If they should lose in Cleveland tomorrow night, boy, I don't know. I don't think they get swept. I think worst case, it's a gentleman's sweep. That is, they get one game, would have to be in Indiana. But should they lose in the second round, yeah, you're going to see a major roster shakeup. I don't think, as the general manager, you could say that you run it back. We're going to do the same thing. What's the definition of insanity? Trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Should that be the case? Should they get swept out of the second round or even just lose in the second round? Yes, I absolutely think that one of those core 4 is gone. Who?
Yeah, I'm not
sure.
I'm not going to go with you should fire Kenny Atkinson. It's his first season. He's done a tremendous job.
Right.
But I just bring up the question of it, if not now, when? I mean, right, last year was the year that these guys had a chance to experience the postseason as that core 4 and really be, I think, obviously there were injuries that played too, but this is the first year where you really had a great chance to make this happen. So I just think that there's got to be some questions surrounding the team if indeed they can't advance. Now, granted, we could come on next Monday. They could be up 3-1, or I don't know the exact schedule of the series. They could be on the cusp of winning it, but it's just a question and a discussion to have right now, given the fact of how last night went.
No, I agree with you. And Kenny Atkinson, yeah, he's safe. He set a bunch of Cavs records in his first season. He's fine. I do think we have some roster shakeup. I think some of the 6 through 10 guys are gone. I don't think we see Okoro next year. But boy, that core 4, if you lose one of the 4, this could be a very different look Cavs team in 2025, 2026.
All right, Paul, what do you got for me?
Okay, well, I promised at the top of the show, spicy takes hotter than your uncle's homemade salsa. So are you ready for this one?
I was born ready. I can't wait.
I'm glad that you and Nick had some back and forth about the Cleveland and Pittsburgh quarterback situation, because we talked about the Pittsburgh QB situation. Here's my spicy Browns QB room situation. Dillon Gabriel will outduel Shedeur Sanders this summer and win the Browns' number 2 job behind Joe Flacco.
I'd actually take you a step further. I think he's got a shot to be the number 1 quarterback if he plays so well. And I'll actually, you want spicy, I'll go another take. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility Shedeur Sanders is getting cut by the time we're out of this camp.
Okay.
You know, if you're Cleveland and you're sitting there and you've already drafted a quarterback, you know, and you have Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett on your roster, I firmly believe that this decision to draft Shedeur Sanders was made by Jimmy Haslam. I think it was the same guy who made the decision for Deshaun Watson. And look, clearly, whether it's a character issue, whether it's a performance issue, whether it's a Deion Sanders issue, the NFL did not feel comfortable with taking Shedeur Sanders in anything higher than the 5th round. And so I think just, you know, generally from that perspective, it's going to be difficult for him to be able to shine. Number 2, I think it's going to be difficult for him to shine because of how stacked the quarterback room is. And you currently are the lowest guy on the totem pole.
Right.
So I think Dillon Gabriel, and you look at the way the two played in college, talent-wise, I think Shedeur Sanders is a higher ceiling. But Dillon Gabriel is like a Michael Penix comparison to me because of how accurate he passes the football and the fact that he can fit footballs into tight windows. And keep in mind, too, Dillon Gabriel is a very seasoned veteran starter. He has been around college football and has gotten the reps that need be to be able to be a capable NFL starter.
And he's won everywhere he's been.
Right. And I may backtrack on saying I think he's going to win the starting job because I do think it might be smart for Cleveland to go with Joe Flacco at the beginning. Yeah. But again, the reason that I say that Shedeur Sanders isn't going to work out in Cleveland is because you just tried the whole character aside thing with Deshaun and it didn't work.
I agree with
How's
that.
it going to work with Shedeur?
You know, what I'm interested right now, I think Dillon Gabriel, based on the draft slot, a 3rd round pick, I think he's safe. I think, like you mentioned, I think that was the coaching staff's pick. I think that was the front office pick. I think they did a deep dive on all the quarterbacks in this class, and they felt that Dillon Gabriel was the best fit for their system. Listen, I love Gabriel. I'm a Dillon Gabriel fan. Watch him at the Senior Bowl. I think the Senior Bowl is one of the best talent evaluation portions of the offseason that we get. And he was head and shoulders above all the other quarterbacks there. The height is really his only thing. Height and age, when you're scouting prospects, are the things that the red check marks next to his name. Other than that, the arm strength is more than adequate. You mentioned the accuracy. The guy's a winner. You don't throw for 18,000 yards by accident. It wasn't like he was part of some system gimmick at one school. He was at 3 different places. He started at UCF. He went to a big program in Oklahoma, transferred out of there, and went to Dan Lanning up at Oregon and elevated every program. And I don't think that even Oregon was ideal for his last year of collegiate eligibility. They didn't have a whole lot around him, actually. I think he could have elevated. He elevated Tez Johnson probably more than he should have been. I think Gabriel's a really, really talented quarterback. I agree. I think Joe Flacco comes out of camp as a starter just because he's got all the things that you can't teach a rookie in 4 months. Like, you can't truncate 15 years of NFL quarterback playoffs, Super Bowl experience into a couple of months of an offseason. So I think Joe Flacco is super, super important to have at the top of that list and in that locker room. Shedeur Sanders, I don't know if he gets cut. Part of this game is jersey sales, and that's why the front office, or I should say the ownership group rather, pushed for the jersey sales. That is Shedeur Sanders. Talented guy. I think he actually fits Stefanski's offense quite well. Mobile without being a runner, and he's another accurate dude. The guy I'm curious about is Kenny Pickett. Where does Kenny Pickett end up? Do you have any idea?
I wonder that too. I think you could be potentially maybe a practice squad guy, although I'm not sure you'd really necessarily want that if you're Kenny Pickett.
Exactly.
I also think you could look at him as potential trade fodder at the beginning of the season, right? Yes. Does a team need a backup quarterback? Does a team need an emergency starter for the first couple of weeks? So I think realistically, you have to keep one of either Kenny Pickett or you have to keep Shedeur Sanders.
Right.
And if you're going to keep Shedeur, I don't think it makes sense to have Kenny Pickett on the roster. So I think trade ability is there. I also would say this too. Look, I'm not saying that Cleveland wants to get rid of Shedeur that easily, but if you play Shedeur in the preseason, he lights it up, you might be able to flip him for a 3rd round pick. And that automatically gets you more than what you drafted for.
That would be interesting. I just think if he lights it up in preseason, man, we're going to have a lot to talk about on this show.
It's going to be starting quarterback, top quarterback in the AFC.
Yeah.
Browns aren't going to ever lose again.
That's right. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us this morning. Erie, thank you for joining us today. My name is Paul Adamzak, and I'm signing off for Isaac Petcash and Rich Smith. Make sure to check out the Gem City Sports Podcast Network throughout the week. Have a great Monday. Enjoy Cinco de Mayo responsibly, and we'll see y'all next time.